host, Mari Riesberg. Over the past several years, I've combined my degrees in acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. I believe we are all creative, and this podcast is all about that. I'll be interviewing people from all backgrounds, ages, and creativity experiences to share just how creative we all are. Today, I'll be chatting with Lauren G Levine, a painter and artist. Please enjoy Lauren G Levine. Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. Today I am here with Lauren Levine. She is a painter, and I am super excited to chat with you about creativity. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate you inviting me to be here.
I am super excited for you to be here as well. Before we dive into the conversation of creativity, if you could share a little bit with our listeners about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So my name again is Lauren Levine. I'm a painter in the Boston area, and I primarily work fairly moderate to large scale oil paintings, not exclusively, generally in the abstraction area, and I do a lot of drawing with charcoal as well. I've been doing that for as long as I can remember, and for the last 15 years, I've also been a muscular therapist, and I've been a mother for the last 6, and I'm in the process of becoming a real estate agent at the moment. So, but primarily, I think painting is the thing that's always been there from as far back as I can remember. It's the thing that sort of sustains me and keeps me sane relatively.
I love it. It's amazing to have at least something, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Nice. I mean, it sounds like you have so many things that you're curious about or passionate about. I imagine muscular therapy, being a mom, now your new endeavor into real estate. It's lots of creativity coming up as you were talking about it. What do you think kind of pulled you in these other directions, and where has painting kind of been that stability and sustainableness? That's not a word, but sure.
Sure, that's a word. It's a word now.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like I said, painting has always been there. It's the thing that I'm the most passionate about. That that when I'm not doing it, I feel the deficit. It feeds me, and I have to sort of keep feeding myself in order to keep feeding it, for it to keep feeding me. It's this sort of cycle, but I've always had interest in a lot of things. There's, I love art. I love music. I love writing. I love reading. I love science. I love, there's so much. And I think that when I started getting into doing body work as a muscular therapist, what became apparent was there was a real correlation between my interest in sort of the human body in the making of artwork, my relationship to the work as it is made, with scale and the physicality of it, but also before I started working more in an abstraction kind of approach to the work, I did a lot of figurative work, and so I was dealing with the body. I always had an affinity for it in that way. And so when I started doing muscular therapy, I noticed that there was sort of a correlation between how I approach the body physically with my hands, therapist, but to the way that I would handle the paint, or working with the line and sort of trying to bring something of that living being onto the canvas or onto the page. So there was a real strong correlation there. And I think I've just always had a kind of an interest in how things work.
Nice. Yeah.
So getting into the anatomy and the functionality of the body and how to help people. Making artwork is in the community. There's a strong community around art, but when you're in your studio, you are alone, and you're sort of doing it for yourself. There's a little bit of selfishness, I think, to that that it's for me. And when I started doing body work, I felt like I was doing something for others. And so that I think that was a good expansion and of my life in that way. So so there's that.
Nice. I mean, I love the kind of incorporating the body into artwork and how your body moves and putting, paint or charcoal on canvas or on whatever material you're utilizing and how your body moves and that function of it, and learning how, the anatomy and how it supports and impacts your artwork from that kind of more functional perspective. It's so interesting to think about art through that lens.
It's an interesting experience too, I think, because when I'm making things, when I'm working, there's the movement that starts sort of inside the body, my body, that comes out in the movement of my arm, of my hand, and the whatever material I'm using to make a mark or to lay down is an extension of that movement. And so I feel like there's sort of a very real transfer of energy from me to whatever's being made.
Yeah. I mean, I love it. I love the incorporating the body into the art and have it be an extension and the energy of all of it. I think it brings a whole new perspective of, now it makes me like going to an art studio and seeing someone's work and actually thinking, oh, what was that energetic experience for them of moving their body to put this onto the page or the canvas or the form or whatever it is. So a whole new appreciation.
I'm so
for
glad.
looking at a piece of artwork. Yeah.
I think that relates to, when I'm working in a large scale, they're much larger gestures and it's a much more immersive experience of making and looking. But then with smaller work or with drawings, I think that's where the sort of intimacy comes from. Something small, something that you feel like you can hold in your hand, even if you're not allowed to touch it. You still feel like it's an object. You walk into a museum and just take them off the wall. There's that sense that you could hold it in your hand. There's that kind of that intimacy and
that's such a great. It makes me kind of imagine there's that tenderness, a little more like vulnerability. Not that larger work can't also have immense amounts of vulnerability, but to hold something in your hand that it just evokes a different emotional experience and setting yourself up to view art or participate in the viewing of fine arts. So I love all of it. But when you think about creativity, what does it mean to you to be creative?
Well, I think that's a difficult question because I feel like our brains are sort of just wired that way, that we are sort of creativity machines in that way, where it doesn't separate out anything like fine art from the mundane tasks of life. I think we're creative there are so many people who say as adults that they don't have a creative bone in their body or they wish they could be more creative or that sort of thing. But it was there. It's still there. There's not a single one of us, I don't think, who didn't draw or paint or play with clay or create a fantasy world or make up stories or make up games or any of these things when we were children.
Yeah.
And it's inherently there. We make things up all the time. And then we're sort of taught to compartmentalize that as we get older and to fit it into specific boxes. You're creative. I'm doing air quotes on a podcast. You're creative when you're, when you're in art class and you're making, or you're in a music class, or you're in a dance or a drama class. Those are the creative arts, right?
Yeah.
But we don't think of the creativity of solving a math problem or investigating, the space, or any of the sciences, the quantum mechanics. I love quantum physics. And the creativity that it takes to sort of imagine seeing these beyond microscopic worlds.
Yeah.
And how to create experiments to observe what happens when you change circumstances or when you break something apart. Or I think, it's how we learn to survive. It's how we learn to find food, to grow food, to catch food, to create a shelter. So I feel like creativity is something that goes back to the inception of us becoming, sentient animals on any level beyond sentience, before sentience. And then it's so prevalent in our childhoods. And I think it's just a matter of, how do you define what creativity is, and how do you, if you feel the need to have more of it in your life, how do you find ways to fit that in? How do you create space outside of all of the have-tos that you do all day?
Absolutely. Well, speaking of kind of like creativity in childhood and how prolific it is, and then in adulthood, how many people kind of step away from that, how do you think you held on to it?
I don't think I had a choice.
Okay.
I think,
say more.
I think it's just how I'm made. I think when I'm not doing it, I get moody. I feel unsettled. I get reactive.
Yeah.
I'm not grounded. And no matter what else I do to try and alleviate those things, if I just go and do 20 minutes of drawing, it's that takes care of it. That's and it's a drive. It's we all have certain things that we're drawn to doing, and it's a drive that I've always had. It's just always been there. I don't know how else to explain it. It's always there, and if I'm not doing it, I miss it.
Okay. Was this something that was like cultivated in you with parents or teachers, or was this something that you really, this drive to do it really comes from within yourself?
Well, it's always been there within myself. But it was definitely encouraged, and I definitely had exposure to it. My older sister, who's about 9 years older than I am, she is also an artist. And so I grew up watching her bring home paintings and making things and making music and writing poetry. And so she sort of warmed up my parents for to have a second daughter say to them, I'm going to art school. So that was always there. I mean, I remember laying on the floor as a child and with my mother and coloring books and watching her use the crayons to, do a perfect outline and then shade it in beautifully. And I would just be drawing stuff in the margins and I was just always drawing. I was drawing triceratopses. I was drawing, I had these books of illustrations of birds from all over the world, and I would copy them feather by feather.
Wow.
Into my sketchbooks, which I don't have the patience to do that now. I don't know how I did it then. But so it's always been there.
Yeah.
And my mother always played piano. And so there's there's always an element of that growing
Mhm.
up. It wasn't something that was a foreign concept to me,
Yeah.
so it was there. And I think the fact that it was there and that um, I think I had already sort of been given permission
Hmm. Yeah. That
to
makes
let
a
that
lot of
come out.
sense. Yeah,
Yeah,
to kind of cultivate it and let it be
yeah,
whatever it's going to be.
yeah. And I took classes at the museum,
Oh,
at the
okay.
Fuller Art Museum when I was in high school, and I went to Saturday classes at the museum school in Boston, and so I was definitely encouraged to
Hmm.
continue pursuing it as I went. It was definitely fed.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah.
And I imagine having such a extensive time of being an artist and a painter, you find yourself coming up against creative challenges in your work or in your life.
Mhm.
What are some of those creative challenges that you've faced and how do you face them?
Well, I was thinking about that, and I couldn't wrap my head around what a creative challenge was until I started thinking about having blocks either
Mhm.
in the studio or something blocking me from getting in, where all I want to do is go there, but I can't seem to get in there.
Yeah.
Um, or blocks when I'm working on something and it's just not working. So there's all different kinds of challenges that come up. And I think I don't know that they're necessarily creative challenges as much as they are um, obstacles,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to another level of, I don't know, something to break through.
Mm-hmm.
And usually in those moments, they feel awful.
Yeah.
They feel awful. They're frustrating. Um, and and I don't know what to do with them. So
Right.
sometimes I have to just walk away.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I have to take a break
Yeah.
and stop working for a few days or a few weeks. I have to get outside for walks. I have to maybe sit and write. I
Mm-hmm.
find writing to be extremely therapeutic
Mm-hmm.
um, and extremely effective in helping me figure out what's going on in my own life.
Hmm.
So I can just sit and write for pages and pages and pages and pages and hope no one ever reads it. And I start to have a conversation with myself.
Mm-hmm.
And, and because I'm writing it down, it can break me out of the loops that I would just kind of stay stuck in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Helps me sort of find a way out.
Mm.
So I find that really, really helpful. Also, just calling up a friend and
Yeah.
talking, going for a really long walk and talking it out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Listening to other people talk about what they do,
Mm-hmm.
is really helpful. So yeah, I mean, podcasts are fantastic for that.
I agree. Yeah, I do a
Makes me
lot of
feel
that.
less alone. And, sometimes if I'm having a problem, I reach a point in a painting where anything I do just makes it worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Sometimes I have to physically remove it from my vision. I have to
Yeah.
remove the offending item so I don't destroy it anymore, or it doesn't destroy me. I have to start something new, or I do some drawing, or I do some writing, something like that.
Yeah.
Um, I need to kind of interrupt the cycle.
Mm-hmm. That makes a
Yeah,
lot of sense that,
yeah.
getting it out of that, your vision space and
Mhm.
giving yourself permission to do something new or try something else or take a
Yeah.
break. I think,
Go watch TV.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I
Yeah.
think there, for many people, that can feel like, oh, I'm failing at this, or I'm not, like, I have to do it. We live in a Western culture that's so much about production and
Yes.
producing, that when we take a break for valid reasons,
Hmm.
we feel, or many people feel like, oh, I'm failing in this moment.
Right.
What are your thoughts about that?
Well, it's interesting. I was thinking about an aspect of what you were just saying today when you said we have this sort of, we need to be producing, we need to be contributing in some way or being successful in some way. And when it comes to making fine art, it is a useless endeavor in and of itself. It serves no practical purpose. It is not a utility item. It's not like designing the perfect frying pan.
Yes.
It doesn't have a practical usefulness. It doesn't mean it is useless.
Right.
It is extremely useful. The process of making the just the existence of these things that allow us to explore ourselves in ways that no other thing can, and then for other people to be able to view them and interact with them and respond to them positively, negatively, whatever they do. These are useful things, but they are not useful in a practical sense. So making fine art in and of itself is not a productive thing in that way as far as society views it. So it's sort of like a double, triple-edged sword.
Right.
So, and I think that there's an enormous importance in doing things that don't have a practical use. In a way, I find those things to be more important in my life than the practical things. Although I should be very grateful for all the people who design the practical things that I use every day. I don't
have to. We're not saying we're not grateful for the practical things.
I'm very grateful for the practical things that are made. But I'm also grateful that I have the opportunity to make things that aren't. So, but within that, there is a lot of pressure to be productive as a fine artist as well.
Yeah.
There's an expectation of a certain amount of work that needs to be made, a volume of work, cohesive bodies of work that need to be made in order to feel like you can approach a gallery, or for a gallerist to want to take you on. There has to be a certain level of productivity, a cohesiveness of the work, an ability to discuss the work, all of these things that are very awkward for us.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pressure in that way as well. And when I'm not making work, I go through that what you were talking about, that thought process of I'm not doing enough, I'm not making enough, and that feels like an invalidation of myself as an artist, as a painter. So there's definitely some lots of pages in my journal about that, I think.
Yeah.
Working through those feelings.
As you were talking, it just made me think about the, practical versus not practical. And yet, I mean, as a therapist, I would say making art is very practical in like your sanity and mental health in terms of like
absolutely
processing emotion or working out experiences, traumatic or not traumatic. There is practicality to it, but it's not necessarily that, like you said, it's not the best frying pan someone has ever designed. But I would feel remiss if I, as a therapist, didn't say there is practical use for producing art, even if the bigger society, yes, there's an appreciation and a love for it, but not only for the creator, but also for the viewer to then process whatever emotion comes up when they view the art that's been created and shared. I think that's a practical use of it as well. So
I think so too. I agree with you completely. And I know that when I look at work, I'm changed by it. I'm affected by it on a very deep level.
Yeah.
It changes me. There are moments of experiencing other people's work that have changed my life.
Yeah, I agree. Seeing something in a book versus seeing it in real life. and
Oh,
thinking,
absolutely.
oh, it's a tiny picture. And then you're like, oh no, it takes up a whole room.
I had that experience. So, we all know Monet's work. We all know Monet's
Yes.
water lily paintings. They're
Yes.
on t-shirts and calendars and tote bags everywhere. But growing up here in Boston, all I'd ever seen for his work in person were the small little haystack studies and cathedral paintings that they had at the MFA. And they were okay. They never really did it for me. I was like, yeah, Monet, okay, I don't really see the big deal, whatever. And then several years ago, I went to Paris finally, and I went to the Lingerie and Museum, and please don't destroy me on that awful pronunciation, the Lingerie. And I went into the room that was designed to show the water lily. You're nodding, you've been there. The water lily painting. And I walked in, and there are no words for the experience that I had in that room. I had no idea what I was walking into.
Yeah.
Those were these enormous immersive murals that they could have been made today. They were so contemporary. They were so beautiful, and there are no words to describe them. It completely blew my mind. And after I'd spent a good deal of time in that room, we walked into what I thought was, we were walking out of them, and we walked into the second room, which were the dusk paintings.
Yeah.
And I cried. I put on my sunglasses because I had to sit down and cry. It was such a profound experience. And that changed the course of my work. That changed the course of how I see the world. That changed the course of how I interact with the world, how I view history as being present and alive. It was a profound shift.
Yeah.
For me. And that was just through walking in front of paintings that I had seen reproductions of my entire life.
Yeah.
And meant nothing to me.
Yeah. I love that story. I had a similar experience in Florence, Botticelli's Venus on the Half Shell, tears streaming down my face. Oh yeah. And sat in that room. I have postcards of the image, and I've seen it everywhere.
Yep.
But walking into that room and that space, it took my breath away. And to see how big it was, and to actually see the curve of the female form, and the color, and the vibrancy, and the life, and the like movement in a static picture was just profound and stunning. And an appreciation. Yeah. Oh, I look forward to more of them. Oh yeah, go ahead.
And then I had the opposite experience with the Mona Lisa.
Oh, right. Yes.
Like, really? That's it?
That's it?
It could be nice. I can't tell. It's 40 feet away from me behind glass. And
it's tiny.
Tiny.
That was kind of what I was thinking when, you see it in a book, and then you see it in real life, and it's like, oh, what?
Completely different.
Huh. It is completely different. I love this conversation about art and the experience and emotion and all of it, and how we navigate it. I'm curious, how would you encourage others to experience creativity in their lives?
Get curious. And when you get curious about something, read and listen to what people who are passionate about that thing have to say about it. I think that's a good way to start. I'm endlessly provoked by listening to people talk about what they do and what they're passionate about, what they love, what moves them, what excites them. And I think like creativity breeds more creativity. Love, breeds more love. It's
Yeah.
I heard an analogy for love recently where, if you light a candle and then use that candle to keep lighting other candles, that that light creates more light, fire creates more fire, love creates more love, creativity creates more creativity. I think these things just are, I can't remember the word that I just had in my head, but they they perpetually renew themselves.
Yeah.
And in us and through us. And I think as soon as there's the tiniest thing that catches your interest, just dive into it. And that could be anything. That could be anything. I mean, for me, sometimes it's just, the beauty of picking up a leaf off the ground that caught my eye, and that can lead to a whole universe. So, but I'd say, if you don't have enough of it in your life, you want to be more creative, whatever that means to you, go for it, do it, dive into it. If it means making things, because to me, being creative is more associated with the making of things, right? Then just start making stuff and don't worry about if it's good or not, because it's probably not going to be good right away.
Yeah.
And that doesn't matter. Make it and destroy it. Make it and destroy it. Make it and destroy it. Or make it and put it aside.
Yeah.
And just keep making more things, whatever it is. But I'd say it's really just about creating time for it and giving it the importance that it deserves. As we were talking about the practical use of things, what we deem as being important in our lives.
Yeah.
What's primary, what's secondary, what's tertiary. And we tend to take things that are very important to us and shove them aside. And
so
I think
true.
that creativity is one of those things, being creative, making or exploring, because we get so bogged down with the responsibilities of life, with our families, our children, everything they need from us, and our jobs and everything that needs from us. And, so get selfish. Get selfish for a few minutes a day. It's okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't make you a bad person.
Right. I love what you were saying, that like nothing is too small to be curious about. A leaf, a thought, get curious. That's such a great reminder, and take some of the pressure out. It doesn't have to be this big thing that you're curious about. It can, but it can also be super tiny. And start there.
Start there. Start with anything that sparks a question.
Yeah. Such a great reminder. I love it. Well, this has been such a spectacular conversation. I just have one last question for you. What does it feel like in your body to be creative?
That's a very difficult thing to answer. It is an extremely physical experience when I'm making work. It feels... Oh, that's a tough one.
Asking all the hard questions here.
I feel it. These are really difficult questions because so much of it defies language for me, which is sort of the problem I have in describing my artwork, because it's not a language-based medium.
Sure.
So the feeling, it feels very energetic. I feel almost like a wave that comes up through my body. It feels very physical in that way. It also is a very physical experience of making. There's a lot of walking and moving back and forth. There are decisions being made all the time, but they're not always conscious. There a lot of them is, I think, what we call intuitiveness, that like people talk about working intuitively. I think intuitive just means you're subconsciously making decisions.
Absolutely.
And so it feels, there's always a lot of feeling going on. I feel things physically in my body, in my chest, in my stomach, and it feels like it has to physically come out. when I'm
Mhm.
working.
Mm.
And I think that it's that the creative energy that we have to make art is very similar to the creative energy that we have to procreate.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a strong tie between the energy of art and the energy of sex and the energy of love and energy
Mhm.
of, any other emotion that comes up that's not all roses.
Yeah.
But I think it's all tied in together, and it all comes from the same place, and it all comes up and out, just in different forms.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing all of this.
Thank you.
If people want to learn more about your work or see the other things that you do, how could they go about doing that?
Well, you can go to my website, which is www.laurenglevineart.com. You can find me on Instagram, which is my handle is at Lauren G Levine Art. You can find me on Facebook, although I think Instagram might be better, but on Facebook, Lauren Levine. And through my website, you can find links to other interviews and where I'll be showing work. And on Instagram, you can kind of see my process and
I love it.
Lots of other stuff.
Nice. Well, I'll put that in the show notes, and it will be easily accessible to everyone. And thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. This has been an awesome interview.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. I've really enjoyed talking with you. Yay. And it's been an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Thanks for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. We'd love to keep in touch, so follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Sustaining Creativity. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tag your friends and family so they can listen too. We love to hear from you, so leave your reviews, comments, and questions. Check out our website, sustainingcreativity.com, for upcoming offerings and creativity coaching. Tune in Tuesdays for our next episode. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.